I'm relatively new as section manager. So I wanted to take just a few seconds to say that although I became section manager April 1st, I have been involved with AUXCOMM for approximately 50 years. And I have been involved with public safety for about 45 years. My history had me involved as a fireman, a fire chief, the planner for the Charlotte Fire Department, and I have run a city and a county. So I feel as though I have a little background on this topic about what communications are needed. Tom Brown, do you want to say anything about your illustrious history?
Sir, as long as you don't mention my parole officer. Yeah, I'm an RF engineer. Ran my own business for 26 years, the last 26 years. Been around the industry, worked all over the world, done lots of things. And but very passionately have dealt with my own state in North Carolina for the last 20 years, and have shepherded, I suppose, and have worked toward getting us aligned with the AUXCOMM side of amateur radio, aligned with what the agencies need and want. Thank you, sir. Over.
And Tom has been section emergency coordinator for 15 years. Well, let's see here if this is going to move ahead. Okay, so the topic tonight is North Carolina. Why are we doing AUXCOMM instead of ARES? And I've got just a few slides, and then we'll leave the floor open for questions or comments and so on. But the first thing to know about North Carolina is something about its environment and its size. North Carolina has 10.4 million people. It's the 9th populous state in the country. It has 3 or 4 major metropolitan areas. Charlotte with about 2.6 million, Raleigh with about 2.4 million, Greensboro, Winston-Salem with about 1.5 million, and Asheville about 90,000 people. So most of North Carolina, though, is rural. I heard somebody say the other night that they had 70,000 square miles. North Carolina has about 53,000 square miles. So it's a big state. And I'll have a map up here in just a second, but when people say from Murphy to Manteo, that's from the southwesternmost corner to the northeasternmost corner, that's 500 miles. So this is a big state. So the environment in which we operate, though, is very important, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the relationship that has been built with North Carolina Emergency Management. We're going to talk about the success of the AUXCOMM effort in North Carolina, and then we'll conclude with capabilities today and tomorrow, and leave the floor open then for questions. Okay, so I mentioned that we had a big state. There's 100 counties. North Carolina is divided into 3 regions for emergency management: the Western Branch, the Central Branch, and the Eastern Branch. And you'll see that each one of those areas is denoted, and that's basically the way AUXCOMM and ARES is organized. It tracks with the Organization for Emergency Management. It would make no sense to have a different organization than the State Emergency Management with whom we partner. So out there, you'll see the Outer Banks, the Barrier Islands, tremendous amount of summer tourism. Up there where you see the 12 on the map, that's where I'm living, up in the high country. North Carolina's topography ranges from sea level to the highest point east of the Mississippi River, which is Mount Mitchell, with an elevation of 6,684 feet. So all of that brown in 12, 14, 15, all of that is very high topography, rugged terrain, and so on. Now, the relationship with North Carolina Emergency Management. Well, in 2005, Governor the governor of North Carolina issued a executive order that NIMS would be used in all emergency responses. The North Carolina officially adopted NIMS as its organizational structure, I guess you could say, for handling emergencies. And then that was 2005. Well, in 2010, North Carolina had implemented its training, its qualification system, and Tom may want to comment on that, but North Carolina then said to all volunteer fire, all fire, rescue, EMS, anybody with a responder role in North Carolina needed to be embracing the incident command system or go home, okay? So if you weren't going to be consistent with the North Carolina system, with the national system of incident command, the NIMS system, you weren't going to be a responder in North Carolina. ARRL indicated that ARES would never have a mandatory ICS training requirement. And that made it very clear that if we were going to be involved with the MCOM in North Carolina, amateur radio would be under the auspices of AUXCOMM and not ARES. There are local ARES groups in North Carolina, and as we'll see later on in the slide, they do have some activities, but basically anybody integrated with North Carolina emergency management and amateur radio would be through AUXCOMM. Okay, so AUXCOMM, has that worked out for us? And the answer is a big yes. North Carolina AUXCOMM, if you don't know what the statewide interoperability executive committee is, every state has one. Every state has one. It's the vehicle through which all Homeland Security funding passes. And Homeland Security, after 9/11, made interoperability a huge priority. And basically said they would fund interoperability communication systems, but there had to be a interoperability executive committee that had all of the players, all the stakeholders at the table. And North Carolina is one of the few states that has a voting member representing North Carolina AUXCOMM, and that individual is Tom Brown. Now, what else has happened as a result of that partnership? Well, we are a key participant. We're not serving an agency, we're a partner of North Carolina Emergency Management. The statewide interoperability coordinator stands up North Carolina AUXCOMM whenever the state EOC is activated. This is going to be a very active hurricane season this year. And Greg Hauser, the statewide interoperability coordinator, will do just what he did last year and the year before, which is AUXCOMM personnel will be pre-positioned down along the coast because it's not possible to move people down to set up comms when the roads are blocked, the trees are down, the floods have occurred, the bridges are out. So we're pre-positioned before the hurricane makes landfall. We are fully embedded as part of ESF2, that's Emergency Support Function number 2 in the NIMS system. And we are a partner with Verizon, AT&T, Spectrum, Sprint, Viper. We'll mention that a little bit more in a minute, but that's the statewide interoperability radio system. The 911 board, FirstNet, the Homeland Security, Cyber Security and Information Security Agency, UNCTV, the Highway Patrol, the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, EMS, and the National Guard. So we're not outside in the parking lot waiting to be invited in. We're there when they are there. So the AUXCOMM system, a lot of people may wonder why we're using shares and WinLink, but that is the primary backup system. There are other backup systems, but when normal communications are disrupted, we operate on shares high frequency and use WinLink as the messaging system to get messages to the state EOC. Any message that is sent to the state EOC through the WinLink system operated by shares or sponsored by shares, coordinated by shares, is automatically routed to the 24-hour watch desk. The North Carolina Emergency Management has a position in the state EOC that is manned 24 hours a day. And some of you may know what NAWAS is, which is the warning system that the feds advise the states and the national capital region and so on. And every state has a warning point. The North Carolina 24-hour watch desk is the state warning point. And if we send a message by over the share system to NC State EOC, it will come up on the screen at the watch desk and also in the SWC's office there at the state EOC. North Carolina EM has a shares HF RMS station at the state EOC and at 2 of those regional branches. That map back there that I had before said there were 3 branches, the Western, the Central, and the Eastern branch. The state EOC is in the Central branch, and the regional coordinating centers for North Carolina EM in the Eastern and Western branches have shares RMS client stations there. As well, excuse me, not just client stations, but RMSs. Okay, and then 6 North Carolina AUXCOMM members have put up 6 additional RMSs that operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And here's the map of the North Carolina share system. Now, out there in the uppermost right-hand corner, you'll see N for Nags Head, North Carolina, and there is an RMS there, and you'll see as you go across the state, there are 9 of them that are operating and can pick up traffic from anywhere and put it into the shares WinLink system. And if it's addressed to the Western branch, it will be delivered to the Western branch. If it's asked to be sent to the Eastern branch, it will go to the Eastern branch. And then, of course, other stations and other states also provide redundancy in our capabilities for HF WinLink shares. Okay, so when we're activated, there is an IAP. The IAP specifies the command structure, the frequencies, the incident command staff, the PIO, the safety officer, the liaison, all the ops people, all the logistics people, all the people that are going to be deployed in an incident are identified in an incident action plan. Because one of the principles of the NCEM system is accountability. You do not self-deploy, and you do not go and not be accounted for. So there's always a demob process at the end of the event, and everybody has to report back that they've gotten home safely. In the comms structure, the lead position in the COMMU, the communication unit, the lead position is the COML. North Carolina has 50 COMLs, half of whom are volunteers, AUXCOMM members, and when we are activated, we are deployed side by side with the State Highway Patrol, with Viper, with OEMS, and all of the other state individuals. We're not second class in any way. We have the same credentials as they have. We also have access to the Web EOC system. Web EOC is an incident management system that keeps track of all resource requests, whether they've been filled, whether they're overdue to be filled, and field situation reports. AUXCOMM was a big deal in North Carolina. We were among the first three, we might have been the second state to adopt the Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, Information Security Administration, AUXCOMM PTB. I don't know whether anyone on this meeting was at the Dayton Hamvention when John Peterson, that would have been May of 2019, announced that the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators had approved the AUXCOMM Position Test Book. North Carolina, in short order, at the next quarterly meeting of the Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, approved the National AUXCOMM PTB as the official document, and then 3 months later, we added a supplement to it that identified additional skills that the AUXCOMM people in North Carolina would have to demonstrate in order to be credentialed. Part of that extra add-on to the book, as well as the AUXCOMM courses that we're offering, include all parts of the standard DHS AUXCOMM course, as well as information on how people should be using Viper, which is the 800 megahertz interoperability system. The Viper system as it exists today has approximately 215 towers across the state of North Carolina that are linked by microwave and fiber, and has presently 120,000 user IDs on it. It is, by one criteria, the largest 800 megahertz trunking system used in the United States. Michigan is alleged to have more towers, but about half as many radios. So we've embraced AUXCOMM training big time, and we have 4 people in North Carolina that have been credentialed by the feds to be AUXCOMM instructors, and we offer the AUXCOMM course 4 times a year in North Carolina. Now, we have also developed a program, a 1-day course on use of WinLink and the Shares Go kits that we have available in North Carolina. The Shares advanced training on that day-long session focuses on how do you choose which channel you should attempt to make connections with, because propagation is different, the time of day, the season of the year. There's a prediction model in the WinLink software that makes a recommendation about the most likely RMSs that you would be able to connect to. We cover all the other modes that are in WinLink besides PACTOR. We talk about the WinLink forms. We talk about how to crop photos and send them without clogging up the system. And we talk about how to attach Word documents. This is an example of the North Carolina Go box, completely self-contained, 2 power supplies, the LDG modem, the HF station, the tuner, and a laptop there that has the software loaded in it. And we've trained people to use those. How many? To date, 900 people have completed the ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800 courses. I've heard somebody there on the blog say they never would be able to get anybody to take a course. I would just say that in North Carolina, approximately 27,000 volunteer firefighters have taken all these courses, and amateur radio operators feel as though they're no better than the volunteer firemen and have completed the ICS courses. 200 people have taken the AUXCOMM course, which is a 3-day course that Homeland Security has offered several times, and now we have the ability to offer it in North Carolina. 100 people are now working on their position test books to become fully credentialed as AUXCOMM communicators. We have a database that gives ready access to EM and the AUXCOMM leadership about all 900 people who are in the database. We have copies of all their certificates, and North Carolina EM can verify the legitimacy of anybody's credentials. Here is a very small print listing of 900 call signs of people who are in the North Carolina AUXCOMM database, and each one of those people has completed at least 100, 200, 700, and 800. The database is searchable, and for example, here is just one of the screens that once you're in it, you can search the person by call sign, by name, get everybody who lives in Boone, what area. There were 15 areas in that map of North Carolina. So you can see who's in area 12, for example. You can see who is qualified in Watauga County. You can find people who live in Watauga County who are qualified, because some of them may actually be working in the daytime in another county. And then you can have it, display it as an HTML document or dump it out as a Excel file. Here happens to be my training record, so that I'm not disclosing anybody else's information, but I've taken 100, 200, 300, 400, 700, several of the other ICS courses, the 800. I'm a COM-L Type 3, I'm a COM-T, I'm an AUXCOMM instructor. So, COM-U credentialing in North Carolina. To be credentialed, trainees must complete the AUXCOMM course. After they've taken the course, they will be issued a task book by the statewide interoperability coordinator. That task book will have the addendum. They have to complete all of the tasks in the book and participate in 2 exercises and at least 1 incident lasting more than 12 hours. That has more than one 12-hour operational period. The PTBs then are reviewed by 4 fully credentialed and federally recognized all hazard incident management team Type 3 COM-Ls. The completed AUXCOMM position task books are then reviewed by the SWIC. And then if he finds everything to be in order, the document is submitted to the statewide interoperability executive committee, which is the authority having jurisdiction under North Carolina law. The CERT, which is, well, excuse me, the CERT, the State Emergency Response Commission, created and authorized the statewide interoperability executive committee to handle credentialing for the COM-U people. Okay, so DSS is very happy with North Carolina. We have been chosen for beta testing for 3 different things recently. In May of 2019, Homeland Security sent 2 trainers to have a train the trainer course. One of the complaints from all of the SWCs across the country was typically Homeland Security could only offer the AUXCOMM course once a year because there aren't that many federal trainers. So the states asked for Homeland Security to set up a mechanism where they could get their own state-sponsored AUXCOMM instructors credentialed. So we had a 3-day course. There was an instructor from Florida and one from Texas. And then we, and I'll admit it, I was one of the 9 people in the class. Jim in Tennessee, whose name I saw there a little bit ago, was also there in the class and became one of the state-sponsored AUXCOMM instructors. We had to then teach a class again under the auspices of the 2 federal instructors, and then were evaluated as to our effectiveness in teaching. And then we have, since becoming credentialed, offered the AUXCOMM course 3 times in North Carolina. However, the coronavirus situation has caused a big problem in delaying a lot of training. The second thing that Homeland Security did in North Carolina was to develop a COMM-C course. And the COMM-C is the COMM-U coordinator. In a hurricane or a large disaster, there may well be multiple incidents, each having a COMM-L and each having a COMM-U that has stood up to provide communications. So the COMM-C is the communications unit coordinator, and North Carolina was the first state in the country to be able to have credentialed COMM-C personnel. Finally, the third thing that was tested in North Carolina was the Information Technology Section Leader course. There's a change coming down the pike in the incident command structure to add a new position where the individual focuses just on IT issues, so that the COMM-L doesn't have to worry about networks and Wi-Fi's and MiFi's and satellites. The IT specialist would be responsible for that type of standing up of that type of equipment. So AUXCOMM works in North Carolina. The North Carolina emergency managers, the county emergency managers, there's 100 of them, and the #1 course that has been requested that EM offer more often is the AUXCOMM course. Now, that's a 3-day AUXCOMM course, and it's part of what is offered by the city of Charlotte. There's something called the Urban Area Security Initiative, UASI, and they have a disaster comms course, a disaster comms school with several courses in it during a week, typically in June, but this year it will be in October. The AUX-C course, at the conclusion of the course, all of the people, the IT section leaders, the COMM-L trainees, the COMM-T trainees, the tactical dispatchers, there's a day-long communications exercise, and the AUXCOMM trainees are directed to deploy those go boxes and demonstrate the ability to send WinLink traffic to the state EOC. There are also several state-sponsored search and rescue exercises where AUXCOMM personnel are included. We're deployed in wilderness settings, out in the middle of a national forest where there's no electricity, no internet, and we're to set up our MCOM and to pass traffic to the state EOC. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do after this coronavirus restriction is lifted, we're going to resume our training. We have funding for 3 more AUXCOMM classes in North Carolina. What are we going to do? We're going to get, we've encouraged the counties to put in shares HF client stations so they have a redundant, an additional redundant path for communicating with the state EOC. And in this past year, as a result of the training that we were doing on the go boxes, 6 counties acquired shares HF client stations. If you were an eagle-eyed observer, you saw that the modem in that go box was a Tort 3 modem, and there's a desire to upgrade everything to Tort 4. We want to have more regional MCOM exercises because it does no good to keep training people and not deploy them. And we want to get more go boxes. So basically, what does ARES do in North Carolina? Well, when ARRL said you'll never require any training and call it ARES, ARES then came to be a local function where the county EOC can ask them to assist in parades or community celebrations. They may be activated when asked by local EM for a local incident, but if it escalates that the state becomes involved in the incident, it would become an AUXCOMM operation. So ARES can be a pathway for involvement for people to get involved with EM and get to know them and to show that they have an interest in increasing their skill set, becoming credentialed in AUXCOMM after they have become trained. Okay, so you were patient, mostly patient, I hope, and I finished my presentation, so I'm open to any kind of questions you may want to pose.
Okay. For those that on your participants thing, you click on that, you'll see a place where you can raise your hand. That might be the better way of addressing you have a question. Marv, I'm going to drop your screen here.
Okay, that way I can see the hands too.
There we are.
Okay.
All right, we got two hands up here. Kyle, why don't you go first? KC9SDK.
All right, thanks, Dan. The question I've got for Marv is, in North Carolina, is Carolina a home rule state? Are the individual counties, do they have their own way of doing things, or are they beholden to the state for Wisconsin?
Can you still hear me, Dan?
72 little,
okay. Well, the 100
72
counties,
little fiefdoms.
now the history of North Carolina local government is they were administrative units of the state. And the state can create counties and abolish counties and change their duties. So North Carolina is not a home rule state.
Okay, that answer your question? We have Fred, K9VV. Go ahead, Fred.
Thank you, Dan. Also, Marv, very good presentation. I'd be curious in knowing what sort of liability insurance, workers' compensation coverage, and tort liability, if any, is afforded to AUXCOMM members.
I know that that has been a topic here on the meetings. Tom, my understanding is that we're not covered by workers' comp. Am I correct?
As far as I know, yes, it is still under consideration by the Attorney General's office. Over.
You know, AUXCOMM is not a per se an amateur operation, and so there has been a discussion as to whether there should be or could be, what should I say, personal services agreements that make people temporary employees. But that's not yet the case. So I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that that has happened.
Hey, this is Tom. Just one more comment. Within the last year, there's been a co-joining of some of the databases in North Carolina that permit or encompass individuals who can generate mission, MISSION, orders for folks, and how that relates to legalities. I haven't heard the finality of it, but the last I heard was it was favorably agreed by the AG office. Over.
Okay, Fred, you got anything more there?
Yeah, I do. What about, okay, so let's say you're deployed and you're working a disaster and something happens, somebody dies and their loved ones sue you as an individual. What protection do you have any from tort liability with the state?
Well, I'll come back with a definitive answer next week, but my belief is that anybody who has been asked by the state government to assist in an emergency, it's not the same as the Good Samaritans, but there is a death benefit if you are considered an emergency responder, and that would require being tasked to do something and being competent and qualified to do it. But I'll come back next week with an answer on that.
Yeah.
Marv? Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, one more follow. The question wasn't whether the first responder was killed. Let's say the first responder was involved in pick something, an evac, and something happened. It was communications related, and the family of the deceased came back and sued everybody that was a communicator in that particular event. And they sued the state. You know how lawyers are; they sue everybody. What tort immunity or relief is afforded to that AUXCOMM volunteer?
I'm not a lawyer and I'm not qualified to answer that question.
Could you find out and get back with the group on that? That's a very good question, and your group should also know that for what's going on there.
This is Tom. Just one more comment. So, alternatively, without AUXCOMM, what does the ARRL offer? Over.
Yeah, we've been down that road. ARRL uses the same umbrella insurance company as they do for the equipment insurance that any ham can buy. ARRL is essentially an administrator. The cost for any ARES organization, they also have a similar program for ARES. The cost for any ARES organization must be borne by that ARES organization. Unfortunately, the company will not write insurance in the Virgin Islands. So the reason I'm asking all these questions is I'm sitting there looking at a draft of a bill I'm about ready to start lobbying our legislature with for this very topic.
Tom, again, look deep into the federal side. Think about it. How you going to do it? Over.
Hey, this is Dennis. I was trying to figure out how to hold my hand up. So one thing you have to keep in mind with this is it's going to be a state-by-state issue of how it's dealt with. So what one state has, the next one's not going to apply. Every state usually has a legislation that's going to cover volunteers and things of that nature. So you can't just do a wide swath. You need to find out from your state, and your SWIC or your EM should know those answers because they're the ones who are going to have to agree to cover you no matter what, because they're going to be the AHJ.
Yeah, I'm very aware of all those answers. Our director of our small territory here, 100,000, is a ham, and I'm aware of what laws there are in the books and are not in the books. This bill would cover. This bill would actually create an AUXCOMM unit within the territory.
Okay, Marv, would you be willing to follow up on that and put something out on the SEC-ARES reflector so that all those that's here, those that are monitoring that? I'm sure there's some things in your organization, they've addressed that issue somehow. We need to know how that's taken care of.
Well, and let me just say this though, the coronavirus has occupied the attention of about 250 people at the state EOC for 8 weeks, and getting an answer on something that is tangential, you know, not that it's not important, but it's probably not as important as other things like personal protective equipment and testing and getting the materials out to the hospitals that have been asking for making resource requests to the state emergency management. Now, just as a little background, I mean, 4 days a week, 1 hour a day, we have been at the AUXCOMM level, been involved in the web meetings with dealing with the coronavirus activation. So I don't know what you all have been doing in terms of your spare time, but it's eaten into my spare time. And it may not be possible to get an answer next week, okay?
All right, that's fair. The coronavirus has slowed a lot of things down, but as soon as you can get that stuff, we appreciate a follow-up. Before I go farther, John, I see your hand up. Before I go farther, on your screen, you have a thing that's called participants. There probably is 2 people there and 43, saying we've got 43 participants. If you click on that, it brings up the list of participants, and there you'll see, down at the bottom, you'll see a place you can click for raising your hand. Okay, Bob just raised his hand. John, you were first, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, so basically you're amateur volunteers working under AUXCOMM, utilizing amateur frequencies?
We could use amateur frequencies, and we have that capability in a lot of different settings, but we would prefer not to use amateur frequencies because using shares, they're assigned frequencies that are coordinated by region. So the QRM issue of somebody deciding, and I don't know whether there's anyone here from Wyoming on the net, but when we operate our statewide Aries AUXCOMM net every night at 7:30, in the wintertime, we have and that's on 3923 kilohertz. 3922.5 is the Wyoming Cowboy net, which they're entitled to that frequency, but they knock us out and we knock them out. And you couldn't have that kind of situation in an emergency. So we use shares frequencies, which are assigned by the shares office.
Okay, well, I am in Wyoming, so I know exactly what you're saying.
Do you hear us?
Sometimes we do, but very rare. It's kind of like we hear it up to a point and then it stops. We run into the same thing in the morning on the traffic 12th region traffic net. We have the same thing. We hear another net goes on and they stop about the time ours starts.
Hey, this is Tom. Can I make a quick comment?
Go for it, Tom.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
So 2 subjects. One is, my first favorite is, I can't remember the frequency, 40 meters wind link. As soon as I hit tune in the handband, the first thing I hear is, if I let go of it quickly, is somebody wanting to put a bot up, complain about my interference. This is Rappaport again, or somebody, whatever. I was supposed to say.
International broadcasters.
At least that. At least that. Secondary part of this is that on the voice net, it's okay if voice nets are interfere with each other, but if it is of significant importance, why stay in the band? Over.
Any follow up on that?
You know, I passed through pretty quickly on the WinLink shares, but the 9 RMSs and the ability of them, of course, as you all know, it's not just the internet connection to the cloud that links those RMS stations, but they can operate radio to radio in hybrid mode and so on. So the message is going to get through, and then it's going to be tracked and logged so you know where the message went. And unfortunately, some of the other modes, it's like shooting an arrow in the air and you don't know when it's going to get wherever it's going to go or whether it got there at all.
I don't see how to raise my hand, but I'd like to make a comment.
Hang on, Steve, for a second. John, are you getting the answers you need?
Yeah, I think so. They're still using amateur frequencies, but in the share under shares.
No, they're outside the amateur band.
Okay. But you're still acting as a volunteer under that, utilizing those frequencies.
We're operating under the authority given by the shares office to the state of North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Operating on government frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to put you on hold a little bit. We've got Dan, COO, that's been waiting there for a while, so I'll pick you up after that. Dan, go ahead.
Well, I'm very impressed with what North Carolina's done with AUXCOMM and DHS. And I had to go get my AUXCOMM book and look at the date on the certificate. I took the course in 2016. And at that time, there was a section leader under the COML of either a type 3 or a type 4 state or combined unified command federal team, so that the amateurs in the AUXCOMM unit were covered by whatever it is, the magic money for typically fire in California covers volunteer fire departments involved with big deployments. We're nowhere near as well integrated and organized as North Carolina is, because we've got this nation-state complex going on at the state level that sort of gets in the way for us to trip over every time we try to do something like that. I'm very impressed with how well integrated you are. And I found just the standard AUXCOMM PTB and looked over it, and on its face, and it wasn't a COML PTB or even a COMT PTB. It was just an AUXCOMM position task book that really had pretty reasonably set bars for completion. But here in California, you'd have to do the same COML task book that a type 3 or type 4 state and or federal incident management team completed in order to get a COML certification. So I think where ARRL feared to go, DHS and AUXCOMM in North Carolina have completely filled the void.
The COML credential standard is uniform across the country. It cannot be watered down. It has to be the same course, the same task book, and it's then recognized. And then, of course, as you all know, there's 5 levels of incidents. 4 and 5 are local incidents. Like 5 would be an automobile crash at an intersection. 4 might be, and it involves a school bus and there's kids that may be in. The 3 would be something where state resources are required, like a large wildfire. And 2 would be a large multi-state operation, and 1 would be an incident of national significance. And the only way you can get credentialed at a given level is to be assigned to participate in an incident and demonstrate your ability at that complexity level of a 2 or a 1. But type 3 COMLs, it's the same qualification across all the country. unless the state has added something in addition, but they can't drop anything. Just like with the AUXCOMM task book, North Carolina added the ability to operate the 800 megahertz Viper system and be able to contact the state EOC and go to a different zone or a different talk group. And we didn't want to have AUXCOMM people be handed a radio and they say, I don't know how to use that. So everybody had to demonstrate their ability to use the Viper radio. And that was one thing. The second thing that they have to do, in addition to the federal, is to demonstrate their ability to use the Go box and send WinLink traffic. And then the third thing is the Web EOC, which is the incident management software that is not everybody should have access to knowing what resources are being requested on the other side of the state. And so that is something that only credentialed people would be able to get access to.
Yeah, I have to apologize to you. I was going the wrong direction.
Okay. Well,
Type 3 teams around here are the local teams where the volunteer fire department takes over from the first, EMS or EMT or whoever happens to be driving by and finds an automobile accident. And then type 2 would be going in the direction of a larger state thing. And for the type 1 teams, it'd be either federal or state, usually combined teams. I just had a brain for it. So my question might make more sense in that sense.
Well,
so if the AUXCOMM class in 2016 had an AUXCOMM leader beneath the COML of a type 2 or type 1 team. And
I think if you looked at the current curriculum for the AUXCOMM course, I think you would find that that's not the way it is now.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. They also changed the name because back then it was DHS OEC ICTAP,
Yes.
and not DHS CISA.
Yes.
Which now CISA is sort of where the U.S. CERT puts out, how do I say it, vulnerabilities in internet-facing software on a daily basis, actually.
Okay, I'd like
sorry
to get
about
more
that.
Hi, Steve. Go ahead, Steve. Pick it up at this point, if you would.
Okay, I'd just like to say one word about the amateur radio spectrum and shares spectrum. Shares is not under the jurisdiction of the Federal Communication Commission. Their mission is the mission of its agency members solely. They're there to support them. The shares WinLink system, ALE system, and voice network system is extensive and uses NTIA frequencies, which do not have Part 97.113 content restrictions, encryption restrictions, or any other restrictions. The state of North Carolina does not want its agency-to-agency transport layers or communications to be subjected to public scrutiny, or certainly not every single message available to the public, which is a requirement for amateur radio. Shares does not solicit amateur radio operators. It solicits agencies, and because agencies usually are not attuned to propagation, are not attuned to other aspects of HF radio or radio other than simulcasting or trunking, talk groups, worrying about the state legislature commissions, their jobs, beating vendors up, etc. They don't know anything about HF, so Shares recommends the use of amateur radio operators to install, implement, and operate the Shares systems in behalf of these agencies without the need for type accepted Part 90 FCC type accepted equipment. That is the difference. So to get down to specifics, when you look at North Carolina, they have seven or eight, nine radio message servers that have the capability of operating with no internet whatsoever as a mesh network. And they also have the capability of operating on over 200 exclusive HF frequencies that are not harmonically related. And they are 24x7. They have some stiffer requirements than an amateur radio operator would have, since they are under the jurisdiction of the agency. That's all I wanted to say about it, because there is some confusion I could see. The ARRL is a shares member. Agencies, civil authorities, and critical infrastructure NGOs are involved. There's probably 2,100 of them.
And critical infrastructure, AT&T and other utilities are on shares, and that network, the data network is on 24/7, of course, and the voice nets are tested weekly.
Okay, Dan, if you can keep it short, I'll put you next, because Bob's been waiting a long time.
I'll let him go. I was going to just ask about whether WinLink uses the same CMS as the amateur radio WinLink CMS.
You have an iPhone. I have an iPhone. We both use the cloud. Neither one of us know each other are there unless we know each other. Shares has various methodologies that use the same common message server, which is the Amazon AWS, the Amazon cloud. However, amateur radio is the only publicly available. If you look on the WinLink website and go to the RMS map, you'll see public listed up there on the right-hand corner. That is amateur radio, but there's also additional, such as the Canadian military, some of our own government agencies, the country of Australia, the Netherlands, International Red Cross, etc. Many other aspects to WinLink that are non-amateur, but mostly operated by amateur radio operators, because they've got the goodies. It's it doesn't cost much either.
Okay.
And also the talent. I mean, one of the things that is the value added of having the amateurs is the talent, but also the AUXCOMM, though, provides vetted and proof of credentialing and various things that make it clear that the people who are in the EOC, the state EOC, are qualified to do the job, or they wouldn't be there.
And I give many kudos to Tom Brown for wrestling that program to the ground and making it work. He didn't comment. I guess he's asleep. Well, thank you.
Okay, Marv, this is Bob from Southern California, in the orange section.
Yes.
What did you have before you had AUXCOMM? Was there a RACES program, or did Aries do it all?
Tom? I don't know where Tom went. There was an Aries program, and that 3923 kilohertz net that I mentioned, and I don't know whether I mentioned it, it's been meeting every night since 1947, except for the last 2 or 3 months, or maybe 6 months, where participation dropped off because there weren't net control stations to call the net. And but that was the way in which communications were routed to the state EOC, would be on that Tar Heel emergency net on typical single sideband 75 meter or 7232 40 meter. Now the system in North Carolina is very robust, and the Viper system certainly can go down. However, I mentioned that all their towers are linked by microwave and or fiber. And hurricanes have produced isolated failures where dishes were knocked out of alignment when the wind was blowing 125 miles an hour, and a site then went into site trunking. And so that's the reason why we have the go boxes and the trained people, and that is to deploy them in forward positions in case those kinds of problems arise. And then those regional coordinating centers receive the requests from the counties in that region and aggregate them, and either they can handle it with resources that are there or they kick it up to the state EOC.
Well, my question is about RACES. So it doesn't really sound like North Carolina had anything.
Well, my understanding about RACES is that it's only supposed to, it derives from the wartime powers of the president and was a mechanism for local civil defense to have a group they could go to and operate when and if the president ordered normal communications to go off the air.
Yeah, I'm aware that that's their claim to fame, that they can operate if the president does that, which, you know, the cat's out of the bag, and I don't see how you can stop it. And it's fairly easy. I know it's a big project, but it's fairly easy when your section is the entire state. As Dan can attest, it's rather difficult in California. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at a mutual aid region map, and my section covers 2 mutual regions. Region 6 consists of 3 different sections just in California. It's kind of ridiculous. And we have ARIES, which speeds up to, we have RACES that takes care of cities and counties, and then statewide, there's the auxiliary communication system, which is like RACES' big brother, which sounds like is what North Carolina's AUXCOMM is equal to our ACS. And it's just
yes.
And you've relegated ARIES into like an elementary school for people that kind of want to get into emergency management. And I think that's kind of too bad to push it off to the side like that.
Well, the problem is, if it's they're welcome to participate. ARIES is welcome. AUXCOMM would welcome anybody who is willing to take the training, so that they could be used as a resource available to AUXCOMM and the state. But if people don't want to take the training, then, and as you know, the level 1 on the current ARIES task book does not require any training. And even the level 2 and 3 does not have, they urge people to take 300 and some other courses, but they don't have a timetable for implementing those urges, if that's the right way to put it. So AUXCOMM is welcome, but they're only going to be activated by a county, because if the incident goes beyond the resources of the county, then the state EM is going to handle it. And that would be using AUXCOMM rather than ARIES.
Right. So AUXCOMM in your state is a service. It's not just a training program.
It's a part of the state emergency response team.
Okay.
And it's ESF2, which is the communications function. That's why Verizon and Sprint and Charter and the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, they're in there because they give out the EAS messages. So the statewide interoperability coordinator heads up all of that. And AUXCOMM is one of those parts of the COMMU.
Sir,
Okay.
sir, this is Tom. May I make a quick comment?
Go ahead, Tom.
With all due respect, the American Radio Relay League is not an AHJ. They have no authority. Over.
That's true. We are a volunteer service. I've never heard ARRLs say that no one ever needs training. So that's
well, it's not required, and
it is required in levels 2 and 3, and that's
it's
rather
urged. No, wait a minute. It's urged. Look in the book. It's
I
urged.
did look in the book. It's a requirement for those other levels, and in order to take the emergency communication courses, the 1 and the 16, those are prerequisites also.
Well, and in 2010, the statement was made that ARES would never have a requirement for ICS training. And that's sort of where the road split, you know.
I think since then, Marv, we rewrote the emergency plan, and a lot of that's been changed on different levels. So it very well could be very different now. I have a comment from one on the chat thing that says it looks like this AUXCOMM is a group of communicators, some of which are amateur radio operators, but it's not necessary. So what does it have to do with amateur radio? Question mark.
Well, the amateur radio operators have the greatest skill set. Now, on the shares, for example, on the shares, there's no requirement that a person have a license, okay? It could be a secretary typing a message and sending it, or even answering a voice net. So what does amateur radio do? Amateur radio provides a talent pool of technically proficient people that others would not necessarily have. REACT or other groups that may not have that kind of skill set. In North Carolina, and then I'll hush, several counties recently asked for the AUXCOMM course so that they could get their RACES people deployable in state incidents, okay? Because RACES is not per se a resource in ESF2. They can operate under AUXCOMM, but the training requirement still applies for responders in North Carolina. Just like we just had a course for 25 Civil Air Patrol people to get credentialed as AUXCOMM people.
Can I throw something in here real quick that everybody's missed?
Okay, go ahead.
That is that to take the AUXCOMM class and to be AUXCOMM certified, you have to have a ham license. Yes. It used to be you had to be at least a general, and they dropped it to a technician. But you do have to be a ham to be AUXCOMM. And one thing that I think everybody's veering away from here is Marv's been talking about shares, but AUXCOMM is really geared towards public safety. It's not about ham radio at all. It's taking the ham radio skills that have been developed and taking it to other support so they can be radios and all kinds of things. In our agencies, that's what they do. We bring our AUXCOMM people in and they get on public safety radios if need be. They don't do tactical stuff, but they can do that. They can support communication. So ham radio is an important part. It's just not the radio that's used.
So back to the question here, you're utilizing the pool of amateur radio operators. You're mixing the amateur radio operators because of their given talents in with a bunch of other people who do not have licenses. In reality, it is not amateur radio. It's just everybody, some of them have a license and some of them do not. And they're all communicating using the same radios. So it really is not amateur radio per se.
Does that matter?
K9OH, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Billy down in South Carolina, the section EC for South Carolina. I wanted to throw a few comments in because I've worked with Tom on a few different levels. I worked professionally in the state of North Carolina at one time. And so I've had the chance to see his program from both sides and also look at South Carolina. One thing I'm going to add right away is South Carolina is a home rule state. So what worked in North Carolina doesn't work in South Carolina per se. So we kind of took the best of both worlds and made it work here. We still have issues. But one of the things that we did here is we kind of take along with our South Carolina Emergency Management Agency here, we took the approach that AUXCOMM is RACES, RACES is AUXCOMM. So our folks that are ARES members, I wholeheartedly believe that ARES needs things fixed. And I think we all recognize that over many years, ARES has had inherent issues that we're not all going to solve in this call. But that being said, we took it upon ourselves here to retain ARES. ARES for us runs at the county level. ARES operators here become AUXCOMM certified if they meet the requirements of NEMS and ICS. And at that point, they can be a state deployable asset if they have qualifications for whatever they're being deployed to. But ARES still very much is a key player. And ARES also still serves the 4 National Weather Service offices that we deal with and so on. So all that being said, I think those of us that I would love to see happen is that ARL take a more forward-leaning approach as to, repair what's been damaged and left undone, what have you. While our AUXCOMM operators, by the way, they're qualified on the commercial radio systems. They're qualified on the satellite phones. Everything that's at the EOC, they become qualified on how to work with it, because they may just have to deal with it if they're overwhelmed. However, I think that as these systems become more robust on the commercial side, they may later on say, well, where is amateur radio fit into this? So in order for amateur radio to hang its hat on MCOM and continue to vouch for the spectrum that we're privileged to have, we're going to have to step up our requirements, our plans, our games, and that sort of thing to remain legitimate. Otherwise, I could see the door open to where ARES or ARL, doesn't have a place in that at all, and therefore we don't have the reason to advocate for the spectrum, and we just become obsolete and fall to the wayside. So, in closing my statement, I'll say that I think I totally agree with credentialing. I happen to have the credentials. And when we are activated in South Carolina, ARES is at the table. Not as we are a part of the AUXCOMM umbrella, but the identity of ARES is not stripped away. We're always still thought of as ARES RACES because that's just what we've known as. That identity doesn't totally disappear. Now, I will say that there is a sect of people that may like to see that happen, but they've seen the value in not letting that happen at the state level, because as you all know, retaining volunteers is very tough, especially when you start adding all these requirements on folks that may not have as much time, whatever their case and their situation may be. When you volunteer at a volunteer fire department or police department, or you get something. Those organizations get tax money. They're set up in a way to give their volunteers something. We don't really give our volunteers much of anything. We're asking them to either take more of their time for more training, or take more of their gas money to go to these trainings. We're asking them to sacrifice a lot, but we're not giving them much back. So I'll conclude with that. I hope that what I said made sense. I do think that a lot of what North Carolina is doing is important, and I think there's a best of both worlds in my view. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We're going to try to get back to the hands being raised rather than people just jumping in here, but I appreciate those comments. And Marv,
Dan, I'm sorry, I'm on the phone.
No, Steve,
as you know,
you're doing fine. You're doing fine. I didn't stop you.
Well, I'm visually impaired and I don't have a way to raise my hand, so I'm sorry about jumping in there. I just, that was the only way I could do it.
No, you did fine, and I wasn't complaining about you per se. We've had some others jumping in here, and I'm trying to get back to the hand thing. I understand the people on the phones are going to have an issue, and I'll accept those. And Marv, to answer your question, I think the previous person answered it. Amateur radio is important. It does make a difference because we are here. We are here to protect what we have as amateur radio as well. And if we go marching off and forget amateur radio, then that goes by the wayside. Bob, are you done? Or you still got your hand up? Are you finished, Bob? RHK?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you. I didn't know how to take my hand down.
All right, I'll take it down. Okay,
right,
Dennis, KE7EJF, you go ahead.
I think maybe I forgot to drop my hand, but because I think I covered a lot of it. But the one thing everybody needs to remember is, and we're all talking in general, I've heard nobody talking about what their local EM agency is asking for, because guess what? They're all of our customers. We're there to serve them, and not necessarily just the EMs, but the VOADs, whoever we serve. And somebody mentioned a few minutes ago about the training. Let's be real. If people, I don't care if they're volunteers or not, if they're trained, if they don't want to take the training, they're not the guys we want out there in the supporting these incidents, because they're generally going to be the problem. I have a huge problem here in Arizona with the people that say, "Oh, I've been a ham for 50 years. I know what's happening," and we all know that's not the case. So training is number one. The way to stay relevant and for amateur radio to be a part of the plan, even in the future, is that training part. No matter what state we're in. I can tell you here that Aries was almost completely pushed out because nobody wanted to do the training, and there was another group that stood up and said, "I want to do that." And just to reveal it, those vehicles that are in my picture of my profile are mine, because I am the ESF2 for the state. I know what the requirements are because I set them. And if you're a John Q. Aries person who shows up without training, I'm not interested. Have a great day. So, I understand it probably more than you guys, and I think it's really important that we continue to push the training onto these guys. And that's all I got.
Dan, may I say something?
Sure, go right ahead.
I'll go back to what I said earlier in the talk. The number one request received from the county EM coordinators is for AUXCOMM training. They want qualified people who have been vetted and have demonstrated a set of skills. Nobody's against Aries, really, and we have people who are locally active in Aries and don't want to be deployed across the state, but they still took the training. And when I mentioned all about the volunteer firemen, I said that because the volunteer firemen as a group have in North Carolina over 250 hours a year of training required. And they're volunteers, they're not being paid to do that. So I don't have a lot of sympathy when somebody says, well, you know, I don't have time for this. It all is a matter of priority. Everybody has 168 hours in every week, and how they use it is up to them.
I agree with you, Marv. The touch on Aries for a moment. Aries is broke. Aries has a lot of problems, so we need to fix them, and we're aware of that. Training is a high priority, and I don't buy off when somebody starts telling me how many years they've been a ham, how many years they did something with their previous occupation. That doesn't set with me, because most of that stuff, it's like I went to college 20 years ago, so I know it all. You know, you learn, you pass the test when you were in college. 20 years later, you don't know it all. And so this self-entitlement thing is something I don't buy. And so I think we all agree with you across the board on that part. Okay, I'm going to try to catch you more real quick. Dan, are you done? You got your hand still up. Are you done?
No, I wanted to congratulate Bob and the SDG San Diego Aries SEC. How do I say this? I'm a refugee from Cal OAS Auxiliary Communication Service Stroke Communications Reserve Unit, and the creativity and professionalism of the amateurs in Southern California is just phenomenally above the understanding of the assistant chiefs in Cal OAS, who the communications branch of California Office of Emergency Services. Assistant chiefs are all amateur radio operators who were very professional individuals in the state emergency management system, but they blew the Auxiliary Communication Service and Communications Reserve Unit as a place where amateurs who want to really excel at amateur radio can go. And that's a whole different story. But Southern California is overflowing with professional, creative amateur radio operators. And I don't know if you gentlemen know Bill Pennington. He was something in Cal OAS, and now he is the state RACES officer. And we've had a dialogue going and via email for 4 or 5 months. And I'm making a pitch that state RACES and all of the sections in California should have an authority having jurisdiction relationship with state RACES, because they in fact are underneath Cal OES, and along with it comes all the benefits of a DSW certification, and you're an unpaid employee of the state when you're on duty performing those services. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dan, unless Marv, unless you got something to add there, I'll move to the next person. Okay, nothing heard. Mitchell, Mike, I guess it is, WB2SFEF in Arizona. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks. Yeah, WB2SEF out here in Arizona. And a couple of points I wanted to make. And I applaud Marv and your team in the AUXCOMM model. We've adopted AUXCOMM out here in Arizona as well. We've trained 250 plus AUXCOMM volunteers across the state. We've, a number of years ago, probably 10 or 11 years ago, I went to the local county, and our county here is a 9,000 square mile county. You know, so I went to the county guys and I said, you're my customer, what product do you want to buy? And they came back and described it. And as a result, I went down, I'm an all hazards COML, state recognized, AUXCOMM instructor, COML instructor now. So we've done all the right things, right, to be part of the team. And we get deployed, right, when we're on the call out list, we're on all those things. But one of the things that's paramount, reason why we're there is NIM says everything starts locally, right? So it isn't a state level program. I mean, it's a gut level program with the municipalities. We have EOCs and municipalities in cities who have AUXCOMM presence now, and they've adopted that. We have county level presence across the state, and we also have statewide presence. So it operates at a lot of different levels, and we become resources available to any level that needs them when it's needed. So as the incident expands. The other thing is that AUXCOMM provides augmentation, right, to the agencies or the served people. So we provide personnel augmentation, as well as the thing we bring as hams is bandwidth. We add more carrying capacity and more frequencies beyond the limited stuff that the agencies have. So we have the ability to take some of their traffic and move it to places where it's working and free up resources. And they recognize that. So we add value by being ham radio operators. It isn't the Aries logo or the Aries model that says that. It's the fact that we're FCC licensed to go take traffic and put it where they need it. And so we can't lose sight or get stuck on the badge on the patch on your shoulder kind of thing, right? We have to do the work, you have to put in the time, and you have to prepare to go do the things they're going to ask us to do in the way they need us to do, whether it's supporting the Red Cross or whether it's a town or a state or FEMA. So we need to be able to go in and help, and we have to be prepared to do it. So don't lose sight of the reason why you do the education, why you do the exercises. And I will tell you, having been in exercises where the inject occurred and said, hey, Michael, 5 ham radio operators just showed up at the gate. What do you want me to do with them? And we said, I don't know who they are. I don't know why they're here. Send them to the parking lot and send somebody to watch them. And they got thumbs up. That's the right answer. So you got to be part of the solution. You have to integrate, and you have to work to that. It doesn't just happen. So that's my soapbox. I think AUXCOMM's a great thing. Marv, sounds like you've done a really good job out there. Keep it up.
Okay, I agree wholeheartedly across the board. The big number one thing is training. I don't care what hat you wear. If you're a Races, Aries, I don't care what hat you're wearing, what badge you're wearing, whatever. You've got to be able to mix in with everybody and be on the same plane, educational-wise. To show up self-employed, show up uneducated, show up that you're a liability. You're not an asset. I remember I was on an earthquake in California a few years back, and I was working for the American Red Cross, and I literally had to call security to move amateur radios out of there. They were self-employing, and they were in the way and a big problem. So I really understand what you guys are saying. Kim, you've been sitting out there a long time in Hawaii. I hope you haven't fallen asleep. Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. This is Clem, K7HO. I'm the Section Emergency Coordinator for Pacific Aries. And Marv, I got to compliment you on your presentation. It was excellent. Here in Hawaii, I'm a member also of Department of Emergency Management, City County Honolulu. I'm Races, and I'm the training exercise coordinator, and I'm also the assistant coordinator for state races with the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. I used to be the statewide ham coordinator for Skywonder, the National Weather Service. So I had a lot of hats. One of the things, I took AUXCOMM in 2018 here in Hawaii, the first class that they were to bring to Hawaii. And we have one AUXCOMM instructor, federal, with the Department of Homeland Security. And our class had to have 2 instructors, as probably Marv knows. And we had 30, maximum was, I think, 30 students. And we took the class, and after the class, the radio, the Department of Emergency Management RACES radio officer compliment us for taking the AUXCOMM class. And in fact, he had planned to have a field exercise with first responder, and he wanted DM RACES guys that took the AUXCOMM class. Unfortunately, because of the heavy rains we had in Kauai, the class was canceled because fire guys were part of the incident management team, and they were deployed to help Kauai Emergency Management Agency. And also the National Guard guys that was an exercise, they were also deployed to help Kauai. So unfortunately, that first exercise that I wanted amateur radio operators to be in was canceled. And hopefully down the road will be, especially after COVID-19, that we can do one like that. For Hawaii Emergency Management, they have shares contract license. Unfortunately, we have not been exposed to that as state races. we've been exposed and used the, what we call the rainbow net. It's something like Marv had your Viper. They do have repeaters that state agencies and other agencies can use. We were trained also in satellite, how to use a satellite and BGAN. But we unfortunately have not been exposed to shares. The various counties and state Hawaii Emergency Management have trip packages, which they can set up as well as first responders, trip packages that was put together that they can set up and talk whenever the main communication, the first responder communication fail. I agree with Marv and others that whether we're Aries, RACES, whatever, we need to have more training. For our serve agencies over here, like state, RACES, Hawaii Emergency Management, and DEM, and the other neighbor island county emergency management, by law, it was passed 2 years ago that if you are a volunteer, you gotta have a background check and fingerprinted. So all DM races and state races on Oahu, I know of, because I remember both, I've been credentialed and had a background check. I'm also a Red Cross volunteer and I had a background check. I didn't object to that. I am the radio coordinator for Red Cross, and that's my role, not to be a shelter manager or work in logistics, distributing food or whatever. My role is to get amateur radio to be shelter radio operators. Now, one of the roles of DEM RACES is to provide shelter radio operators. But we only have 30 people for Oahu. We have over 100 shelters. So the DEM director has asked me, why don't we use Aries members, train them to provide shelter radio operators? Because the DEM RACES might have to be deployed to first responders to help out in case the fire, police, EMS radio communication fail. So I'm working with Red Cross, and some of you folks are very familiar with the May 30th, the Aries American Red Cross exercise that's starting on the last Saturday of May. And we're using that exercise because our hurricane season starts June 1st to November 30th. We're using that exercise to prep our Aries members for the hurricane season. And we probably do additional exercise and probably use the simulated exercise emergency tests in October 3rd to supplement and learn from the May 30th. And that'd be another exercise for our shelter radio operators to use the Aries guys. Now, here in Hawaii, because we don't have a lot of resources, being an island state, just like similar with Puerto Rico, we learned when Oscar came to us 2 years ago and explained what happened. I think he said that he had 7,000 licensed radio operators. Out of them, only 2% were able to be involved in MCOM. We have maybe about 2,000, 3,000. 2% of that for all counties, 4 counties, in the state of Hawaii. That's limited resources that we're further away from the West Coast versus Puerto Rico. So what it is that here in Hawaii, we're unique. We all work together. We have to work together. Whether it was RACES, DM RACES, state RACES, Aries, we all gotta work together. And so my role as an SEC is to get people trained to use WinLink. And we're starting to get a lot of people interested in WinLink, and we'll be using WinLink for our May 30th exercise. There is a share RMS gateway here on Oahu, and you gotta use PACTOR to use shares. You don't have to be a licensed amateur radio operator to use shares. That was mentioned several times. But they like to use amateur radio because they're better trained radio operators and therefore can use the radios. Unfortunately, like I said, High EMA has not trained us in that yet, and hopefully we will have that training. But I have to put my 2 cents. The only other question I have to ask Marv is that when I took AUXCOMM in 2018, they were talking about at the national level for ICS to open up communication as one of the branch chief, operation, planning, logistics, admin, finance, and probably communication, because they felt communication is very important. Has that on a national level changed? Have they opened up as a communication branch chief instead of the communication leader comes under logistics branch chief? So that's my question to Marv.
Can you restate just the question? I'm sorry, I had a distraction here. So give me the last 30 seconds of your statement.
Okay, when we were taking AUXCOMM in 2018 in Hawaii,
yes,
it was mentioned that at the national level, the ICS system, they were looking at moving the comm portion out of the logistics branch and make it its own branch. So you have operations, logistics, planning, communication, and admin finance. So instead of 4 branch chiefs, you have 5. Being that you're now a trainer, have you heard anything about that, about the changing in the ICS system with communication being a branch level?
Yes, I have heard that. And the ICS model is, how should I put this? I've heard this discussion about taking comm out from under logistics and making it report directly to the incident commander. And alternatively, I've heard a discussion about taking the comm unit out from under logistics and put it under operations. Now, our statewide interoperability coordinator, Greg Hauser, the SWIC, and the North Carolina EM model reports to the Deputy Director for Operations. It is when operations, when the state EOC is stood up, the COMU is stood up at the same time. In other words, it's not afterwards when other people get to the scene and other people get staffed up and then somebody calls for communications. The communications unit in North Carolina Emergency Management stands up at the very time that the state EM stands up. So I don't know that that answered your question, but in North Carolina, it has been moved out from under logistics and now it's under operations.
Okay, so thank you. That's for your state, but I see in a text message from Steve, it's still under consideration.
I think that's correct,
Steve.
yes. I don't think it's been approved as a change.
Okay, Kim, are you done there? Did you get your answer?
Clem, yeah, I got my answer. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. And okay, I don't see, whoops, Pete's got his hand up. So go ahead, Pete, take it away.
Hey, thank you. Are you able to hear me okay, Dan?
Yes, you're doing fine.
Very good. Well, first off, I want to thank you for hosting tonight. You're doing a super job again. And Marv, a great presentation. I'm on the AUXCOMM working group in Michigan, and I'm the district EC for the Upper Peninsula. Our SEC passed away about a month ago. We do have 3 assistants, and one hasn't been selected to take over. So I'm kind of participating in sharing information back. My question for Marv: what are you doing in North Carolina for background checks for your people coming into AUXCOMM? This seems to keep getting batted back and forth. Just looking for some ideas what you're doing there.
Well, I can't give you an answer about how consistent it is, and let me explain why. Some of the people who are in AUXCOMM have been vetted through the Red Cross for a criminal history check. Some of them have been involved with national security special events and have been vetted through the Secret Service. There is not, as I understand it, a systematic criminal history required of North Carolina EM. I would say a large portion of the people have been vetted for a criminal history, but I don't know that that is an official policy at this time.
So, and officially from the state level, you don't have a database that says of the 200 people that took your AUXCOMM classes, how many of them have clean backgrounds and you wouldn't hesitate to send into a shelter, for example?
Well, now wait a minute. Now that's a different question.
Okay.
That is a different question. I happen to be a Red Cross disaster a DAT member and a DST member, Disaster Services Technology, and we do not put amateur radios in the shelter where there are women or children. We put them in at the registration table. And we do not have any amateur radio operator in the shelter with women or children.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful to know. In fact, I had a district conference call prior to this Zoom meeting with our Red Cross director, the new guy that's been appointed to our district and planning for the May 30th exercise. So we're just starting to work with him and build that out. Very helpful, Marv. Thank you, sir.
Before everybody goes home, Dan, may I say one thing? Because actually we've done pretty well. We got 29 still hanging on there from 38. So I am not anti-ARRL or anti-ARES. No way. And I don't want anyone to go away thinking that North Carolina is anti-ARES. The very unfortunate happening was at the Raleigh Hamfest when a statement was made by ARRL there would not be any training requirement for ARES. And if you were going to require people, they couldn't be called ARES. If you were going to require them to have certificates, they couldn't be called ARES. And that's, as I said, that's where the fork in the road came. If I do not have any delusions or illusions that what North Carolina is doing would apply in every other state or maybe in any other state. But I know that bringing up ARES now and saying, I want to have it as a statewide primary resource, you know, I could see where I would be the only one left in the room.
Well, Marv, a lot of that was fueled by my comments, and I do apologize. I think, and most people here think that, I feel they think anyway, that training is the #1 thing. I don't care what badge you wear, what hat you wear, or anything of that nature. ARES itself has a lot of baggage, has we have a lot of work to do to get it up to speed. The biggest thing is we need to be at the same level. If we want to go in and play with the big guys, we got to be at their level and training and understanding. And like in the Red Cross, when they're on a disaster, you cannot tell the difference between a volunteer and a staff member. They work seamlessly together. That's the same thing we need from the hams. I don't care what badge you're working, but when we combine them into a group, you can't tell who's RACES, who's ARES, who's AUXCOMM or whatever. It doesn't matter. So when we deploy, we are an asset, not a liability. Okay. So I really believe what you're doing is great there. I appreciate you coming on and telling us about it. And I don't think anybody thinks that you're against the ARRL or hams at all. You're just one of us.
I've got 5 repeaters that I maintain that I don't get to use very often because I'm doing these meetings. But on a serious note, I would say this: if a if a group, whether it's ARES or RACES or AUXCOMM, if the emergency coordinator or the section emergency coordinator or assistant section emergency coordinator, if that person could not name the SWIC and have the SWIC know who that person is, that's where there's a deficit right at the very beginning. Relationships. What people should do is say, I have a group of people who would like to help you. How can we help you? Rather than some groups have said, well, we won't do anything until they ask us to do it. And that's when trees are falling and bridges are washing out and all kinds of other calamities are occurring, that's not when people want to meet up with strangers.
Well, I agree with you there, Marv, but I might add to that. It isn't sometimes what we're doing. We're on site, and we may all of a sudden find ourselves not being a radio operator. We're doing something else.
Absolutely.
And that's something that doesn't seem to be understood by a lot of hands. I'm here with my radio, and I'm not going to do anything else but that. That isn't by it. You got to pitch in and be part of the team when you're there. And that's just my personal feelings, but I believe that's how it needs to be. I know here in Idaho, our state EOC they're combining HAMS and AUXCOMM and all that in one roof and trying to unify all of that. It's an uphill battle because you got a variety of different kind of volunteers, and some are more willing to do things than others. So that's a struggle. Sound like you guys are doing good over there. Yeah, go right ahead.
This is Billy again. I think that you hit on something that I was really driving at with my comment a while ago. I would like to see one unified operating picture, personally. I think one of the biggest problems in amateur radio is division. Every time, and I've had to work with Tom Brown on this in the past as it relates to Skywarn, for example. Every time, right now with ARES, we don't really have much of a way of I guess you could call it control. Every time a small group of individuals get their feelings hurt, they go create another group, then another group, then another group, and I would love to find a way, and I know that's a big lift, but I would love to see us find a way to get everybody in a relative agreement. There's always going to be some people that are not, you can't please everybody. But I think that comments like what they experienced in North Carolina. We've had similar issues in South Carolina where people, you got to find a way to bring people together, because the more fractured we are, the less voice we have. Doesn't matter what our capabilities are or how many certifications we hold or how great our training is, but if we are all fractured, I don't think we survive. And that's just, I'd love to see us find solutions to be more unified and be more interoperable, and not become less interoperable and fall down the same rat hole that public safety fell down before 9/11. So, and I think for me, interoperability is not just a equipment issue; it's a people issue. It's getting people to work together, and sometimes they're not always going to agree on the road to take to get there, but they need to work together, and sometimes they can't have it their way. So that's my thought.
Those are good words, and I think we all agree. I might make a comment before everybody goes here. I'm in the middle of negotiating right now with some. What I want to do is start in somewhere, hopefully the first week of June, which is coming right up. But I want to start some unified training on this channel right here, if you will. I want to start out with something, everybody's is WinLink, and we'll start out from the basics, work up. This idea of somebody coming on, which we've had, everything you need to know about WinLink, you go to this website and don't bother me type of a thing. That don't buy it because we're not all the same way. You almost have to handhold everybody to get them up to the same level. So we want to develop that kind of training here. And I don't care what hat you wear, whatever, we're try to do it on a common ground. We've got some bugs to work out of it, but that's what we're trying to do. And as we go into it, I'll be involving you guys. I want feedback as to how we can unify it. I also want, I don't want to be one area doing it. I like to be, I want ownership. So, you know, North Carolina can be a part of that training scene. Florida, California, there's a lot of people, we have a lot of talent, and a lot of people that can do some good training. It's ownership, and we come together as a nation, if you will, or a national group to, and a mixture of hats to start working together and being on the same level. That's my intent. It's a uphill battle, but that's what I'm going to try to do.
Dan, I think you're absolutely right on that. From my perspective as a person with a disability, one of the things that I have learned in my interactions with people over many years is meet people where they are. Not everybody's going to be where we want them to be, and that's something that in the 3 years of being SEC for here in South Carolina is really going out to these various groups and meet them where they are and help them strive to be better. Because we're all, I think, trying to head towards better training and those things. But I think even our emergency managers, the people we serve, back to Marv's comment about, you know, asking them what they want, they also realize here they want the cream of the crop, but it's going to take time to cultivate it. It's like growing a garden. It's going to take some time to get these people up to those higher levels. And thus far, that's why our local EMs are not heavily pushing requirements. But if you're going to serve a state agency in our state, for example, we require background checks. We have stringent requirements, and they get badged and all those sorts of things. So I think meeting people where they are is something that will really help any other SEC out there trying to get more volunteers.
That's our goal, and it's going to be a collective thing. This is not me. I'm trying to drive it, but I need somebody to be the engine, the fuel, and actually the brains of this whole thing, so we collectively come up with something that's beneficial to us all. I'll probably be holding a special meeting on this once things get rolling, so we get some other feedback, how we can get the different sections and states involved with this thing and make it work. Well, gentlemen, we've been on this thing. This is the longest conference I've had. We're at about 2 hours now. I know Oscar over there has probably fallen asleep a few times, and some of those on the East Coast in the same time zone. So unless we have something more, oh, we've got some hands up. Kyle, go ahead.
Yep, thanks, Dan. One of the things that I wanted to mention, just kind of in response to your last set of comments and the gentleman that's on the phone, the one thing that I always tell my operators is, I don't care what radios you're showing up with, you guys are my communicators. That's what you're being sent to do, is communicate. You have a skill as far as passing traffic goes. You do it accurately, you do it cleanly, and you do it efficiently. That is what your skill set is, and that is the most valuable asset that we bring to the table with this. It doesn't matter if you're doing it on a ham radio, if you're doing it on a public service radio, if you're doing it on a hospital radio, if you're doing it with a fax machine, it doesn't matter. As long as you're passing the traffic and getting it through to where it needs to go cleanly and efficiently, that is the key.
Several years ago, back in the 80s, when I was doing the SEC, wearing the SEC hat, we had a dam break up here in Idaho. Big thing, lots of damage, lots of problems. And I had made the statement that I don't care if the message starts out from point A with one group goes through all these different groups. And I happened to mention CB at that time, when CB was pretty hot. I said, I don't care which of these groups it goes through, as long as it shows up at the other end, point Z, and the way it's supposed to, in order and with accurate information on there. I got backflack forever on that. In fact, in 2009 at a Handfest, a guy brought that up, that I was working with the CBers. I don't care what the hat they wear. It's the job they do. Okay, I'm blabbing on and taking time. Kyle, do you got anything more?
Nope, that pretty much covers it, Dan. It was just, you know, that's the big thing. I mean, we do credential all of our people and make sure that everyone is vetted and everything and has background checks. Anyone that accesses any EOC in Wisconsin, whether it's a local, county, or state level EOC, has to have a background check and be credentialed. That's a non-starter for anyone.
Yeah, and in North Carolina, it would not be the case you could get in unless the EM people already knew you. You'd never get in the building.
Yeah,
so quick question.
Go ahead, quick question.
So how does Red Cross, I'm not familiar enough with, our Red Cross in South Carolina, unfortunately, is in a mess, but how is it that they do their background checks? Does the local Red Crosses do it themselves, or do they have a national person that does it? And because I think, you know, running background checks obviously cost money, and Aries doesn't really have a budget or have money to work with per se. But it would be nice if we could do some things like that on the front end, because like in South Carolina, our volunteers that are going to work at the state has to background check them, or we said if they already had a CWP, concealed weapons permit, that automatically qualified them. There was a couple of ways to do it, like they said in North Carolina, but there's no consistency for just a volunteer showing up to be a part of Aries. We don't have a way to background check them, and I think that hurts us a lot.
Well, your question about how does Red Cross do it, it's done at the local. When a person applies and becomes, you know, a volunteer for Red Cross, they've got to take a couple, maybe 3. Introduction to disaster services is certainly their minimum training, and in order to get into that course, they had to do a background check on that individual.
Gotcha. But I guess the difference then at that point becomes is, you know, each Red Cross has a budget to do that. And right now we don't have the infrastructure in place to do it for ourselves.
Aries is pretty much relied upon the agencies they serve for that when it's necessary. Here in Idaho, to be a part of the IOEM structure, they'll do it. Red Cross will do it, this kind of stuff. I'm hoping that when we get back to the restructuring Aries, as soon as we get a manager on board and start looking at Aries seriously, we'll address the liability insurance problem, we'll address the structure, how it's done, we'll address all these different things we brought up here. Until we get somebody that's accountable at the league, a manager that's going to take hold and do something, we're kind of out there floating, but we've been floating for quite a while anyway.
Well, you know, if we start ahead of time getting a really concise list that the majority of us in the field organization agree on, and I don't know, maybe some document already exists, but I think if we're already doing the groundwork, when this person comes on board, we're probably going to make it pretty easy for them, unless they see major changes that they don't agree with what we're thinking. But I think we have a golden opportunity to drive that, and I applaud everybody that I'm hearing that is doing what they're doing, because I'm the young guy in the room. I'm probably the youngest guy around here, but I'm certainly enthusiastic and interested. Because I've been a part of the Aries program for 20 years and worked my way up. I see tremendous value, not only as an Aries member, but as a professional employee for several public safety agencies. And so I applaud you for what you're doing to try to do that. And I think if we provide, if we build those things as I think we're trying to do, I think we'll be ahead of the game when and if this person is selected and starts.
Yeah, my biggest worry is previously we had no input. They claimed we had input, and we found out that didn't work. That we have to be able to mix what they come up back in in headquarters with the real world we're dealing with out here. And I think we can accomplish that from everything we're seeing come along. Okay, we're really running some time. Dan, you still got your hand up. You want to wrap it up?
Well, I just on the comment about Red Cross background checks, they use among the least expensive commercial, does this individual have any felonies on the record kind of background check. And then there are background checks like Cal OES does, which just asks the California Department of Justice and the FBI if you're a bad guy. And then there are background checks where you fill out an SF-85, and as a supervisor, I spent $10,000 per employee that applied for jobs to whittle them down just to those that passed that background check before I could start making best value selections. So how do I say this? Background checks for amateur radio operators has to be whatever the AHJ they work with insists on. And there's just no way out of that. I don't think we'll ever have a national ARIES credential that means anything other than certifying that you have whichever of the NIMS classes you have. And I was really pleased to see that North Carolina has realistic requirements. If the AUXCOMM position task book I was looking at is what you had, and I never found the North Carolina appendix to it or component of it, but all they asked for was the 4 core 100, 200, 700, and 800, and then demonstrated practical experience for everything else, which just makes all kinds of sense. But to get to, and in the 2019 ARIES plan, after working for the Park Service in more capacities than I want to talk about, I still have to complete 400 and several of the professional development series to be qualified for the position I hold as an SEC.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what it was like in 2010 is not very related to what it's like in 2020 because of the 2019 ARIES plan, but still, as Dan so frequently says, ARIES is broken. And I think it's just a vain hope on the part of ARRL that signing off on that plan that nobody objected to too loudly meant that they had fixed it. I'm done.
One of the things, Dan, that we have encouraged people to do is to take the 300, and that's the not the major events, but the incident command is a 3-day course, and it can be taught locally. And we have found that that was a real bonding experience with the fire and police and EMS people. And, it was kind of like they looked upon the amateur radio operators as being willing to get down there and take the same kind of training that they have to take. And and I've taken 400 as well, and such as that. But and the COML does not require 400, but it does require 300.
Okay, Dan, are you done there? Hello, Dan?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, and thank you.
All right, not a problem. I just want to make sure everybody's questions are answered. We've gone into way over overtime, but that's okay. It's been worth the time. I really appreciate Marv and